You're listening to Scratching and Thriving, a lifestyle podcast hosted by two dope professionals who are passionate about empowering people to thrive. I'm Dr. A.
And I'm Brandon. And we are two longtime friends who met about 20 years ago during undergraduate studies. And we took two different paths in life. I'm a healthcare executive and lifestyle guru.
And I'm an educator and entrepreneur.
And we are here to bring you the content that will help you thrive. Well, good day.
Hey, Brandon.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
It's been all right. It's been a challenging little week, but you know, it is what it is.
Okay. Why? What's going on?
I don't know. You know, sometimes folks just try you.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, your kindness is taken for weakness and things like that. And then you have to show them you from Memphis and, all that old other stuff, that unnecessary stuff I'll be trying to avoid. Don't show them I'm from Memphis. Now, I can show you what I can do, but I don't want to do that, Sometimes you be like, okay, is this what I really should be doing in my life? Can I do this for the next 20 plus years? Can my nerves handle this? You ever had those days when you like, am I really walking in my purpose?
Oh yeah. Especially on those trying days where people, they've hit that right nerve and you're like, can I really do this for the next 40 years?
Or do I want to do 40 years in jail?
Right.
And that's it. And there it is.
No, it's really important to make sure that, you are walking in your purpose and you're mindful of what your purpose is and the path you're supposed to be on and be confident in that,
Right. So, of course, we're not experts in this.
Right.
We need to elicit a little help.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's good because we have somebody with us today, Dr. C Nicole Henderson of Dr. C Nicole Henderson Consulting. And this is what she does. She develops individualized coaching strategies for scholars. She helps students identify their interest in their paths. And, her own personal story is so interesting because she took a risk by living in her purpose and living in her passion and going after her dreams by starting her own business. She has over 20 years plus experience in higher education as a dean, faculty member. And so she decided she would leverage that experience and help other people. So, she is,
nice.
I know she is the best person to talk to about kind of how to overcome things like imposter syndrome, how to deal with fear and self-doubt, things like that.
Well, why don't we get Dr. Nicole on the line?
So, Dr. Nicole, we are so glad to have you here with us today. How are you?
I am doing well. Thank you very much for inviting me. I am glad to be here.
Yes, you have a really interesting story about how you sort of came into your own in regards to working in your purpose and living in your purpose and walking in your purpose. How did that come about?
I'll be honest and say it is not something that happens quickly, or it is definitely not something that happens overnight. It is something that occurs over time. The work that we do and the life that we live, we figure these things out over time. And so one of the things that I shared before with others I've talked to when we had these conversations about living in your purpose, and especially myself, I'm guilty of that as well because of, working in higher ed 20 plus years and working with high schools and colleges and families and students and helping students on this journey and this path to a college education. We really don't talk to students about really finding their purpose. That's what's really important for them when they're starting on this journey. Like, how do you find, like, I have a new term I use now, like, what is your lane? How do you find your lane? That's the new way of saying, but it's really their purpose.
And, in Sunday, because corporate America, we say stay in your lane.
Yeah, same thing. But they got to get there first.
That's true.
Right.
So I guess, and the question is, how do you find out which one is your lane? And how do they stay in it? Because I think the first problem is identifying what your lane truly is.
That's so true. And I think part of it, that's why I said it takes time. So part of it is the experience in life. So we do have to experience it. We do have to have some of those things that will help us figure out what it is. Like, for instance, a lot of the things I do now, working with families and young people, because the work that I do with my consulting firm and helping families develop a college strategy, it's not just about admissions and college and what college am I going to, and I'm going to get through this college admissions process. But the whole thing is how you're going to get across that stage also to graduation.
Absolutely.
Correct.
You know,
Correct.
so for me, just getting you through the door means nothing. I mean, I don't want to minimize it.
Right. Because that's a big deal to even get to the point where you get accepted, you get in, but it's persisting through.
And think about it. If students are, like you said, not in their lane from the beginning or trying to figure that out, it's very hard for them to persist and to retain them and keep them there. So some of the things that I talk with families about, and for myself, is you have to go out there, you have to explore, you have to do things. Even with students right now in high school and families, I'm talking to them about, you need to start looking at what you're doing right now. What brings you joy? Where are you happy? This, you know, what makes you happy? What are you good at? And what are you not so good at? Stop trying to take all of the classes when you're really, really not good at that class, but you can shine like crazy over here and you love it. That's okay. So this idea of this well-rounded, that you just have to be good at everything, is part of that as well, too. That's what makes it hard to find your lane.
Right. So with that being said, once you find your lane, what does success look like to you? So we like to ask all of our co-hosts, our guest co-hosts, because, you know, we started this podcast on the basis of what success looks like and how to thrive. So in your definition, what does success look like to you?
So if you asked me that question some years ago, it would have been a very different definition.
And it does change, right?
It changes. And
it does.
It changes. And so I think that's part of the growth that happens too as we go through life, that we have to understand that that definition will change. And we also have to understand that success isn't a destination. And it's a journey. It's a journey. I was going to say, you probably heard that before. But early on, again, when I go back to the point I made about how we bring students up and the information we give them, we think that we're teaching them that they're getting to this place. You're going to get to this destination and voila, that's it. And that's not it. So for me, many years ago, you know, I followed the traditional idea of what success was. You know, it was all about college education, stacking those degrees, getting that position, moving up the ladder, getting that corner office, you know, getting that title, making that. It was the same thing, but not realizing the more you did some of those things. And for me in my journey, I found that the more I moved, it took me further off of my purpose. So finding your purpose is part of this journey as well, too. So for me, I think what happens is, and I love, because I incorporate so much of this now into my consulting work, even with young kids as early as ninth grade and with families with younger kids. But for me now, when we structured it the way we did, we never looked at our inner selves, our spiritual being, our personal side. So for me right now, success really is paying attention to my inner self, my inner spirit, and what does that feel like?
That's profound.
I think so too. Yeah, I think that's really powerful. And paying attention to your inner self. And I think a lot of people struggle with trying to figure out their purpose. Like like you said, we go through life and they don't even know kind of where to start. And I think paying attention to that inner self. Who are you? What do you care about? What are you passionate about? What are you good at? What are your talents? Naturally, like those kinds of things help lead you to your purpose as well.
Absolutely.
You know, one of the things that I hear a lot of from people who feel like they're stuck, maybe they're stuck in a particular position or they're stuck in a career or a situation, they'll say, I can't move right now. I can't leave right now. It's not the right time. And there's this sense of anxiety or fear about really kind of walking out and stepping into their purpose. Did you experience that? And if so, kind of how did you overcome that? And what do you recommend for people as they're trying to move past that?
Oh, absolutely. We all, for the most part, and I'm saying we, but I've heard it, I've seen it, I've talked to a lot of people and have worked with a lot of even professionals around this and overcoming that fear and dealing with that fear. So a lot of the resistance that people put up, I can't do it right now, now is not the right time, it really stems from fear. So, but what we have to understand is fear usually is unwarranted and built on this false idea of a what if. So we have these, well, what if this happens? Or what if this happens? What if I don't find this? Or what if I lose this? So we build up in our mind the worst case scenarios. Typically out of these fears. It's worse than anything typically. And if you look at any of the research, counselors, therapists will show you that more than likely, most time, the percentage of what we work up in our mind is worse off than what actually occurs.
That's true.
And
not only that, we can be our worst critic as well.
Absolutely.
Right.
And we don't have, sometimes that there's a lack of confidence in that piece as well, too. And one of the deep-seated pieces of that is having to figure out who you are again. Because depending on where you are in your life journey, when you're having this question around, I'm stuck, I want to make a move, I want to pivot, I feel like I'm not on my purpose, I need to make some change. But guess what? I've been doing this my whole life. I worked my whole life to get here. So what does that mean now? So who am I?
Right.
So that.
Speaking of that, who am I? Have you had imposter syndrome? Have you experienced that?
Oh, absolutely.
And how would you tell people to navigate that?
First of all, I don't believe in imposter syndrome. I do not. Okay. I don't experience it. I don't believe in it. I believe, and I just don't accept imposter syndrome. I believe it is another racist attempt to create a sense of inferiority in us.
So before we move on, let's talk about what imposter syndrome is, because some people listening may not actually know.
Okay. So basically, my interpretation of this and imposter syndrome is around as we move into positions or as we move up into positions in higher leadership, we begin to question ourselves around whether I have what it takes to be in this position. Right. And we doubt ourselves that I can handle this position, especially if you moved up into the higher echelon of a position. So it's usually those who are up in executive level leadership, or it could be at any level, really. But as you're moving up, the food chain, you begin to question yourself. So where this imposter syndrome came from, I like I said, I don't accept it.
Because I was just going to add that a lot of people feel like they are a fraud. So sometimes people may be familiar with not the term imposter syndrome, but they feel like they don't belong someplace. Like, I'm here, but I'm not welcomed. I don't belong here. I'm different. And so they feel like they are sitting in a position or sitting in a place where they're a fraud. And I think it's really interesting that, you say you don't believe in it, because a lot of people buy into it. And I'm sort of with you.
And I think, and this is where I think the disconnect is for me and why I don't, because what you just described to me is I don't fit in, I don't belong. Is that really that person's issue, or is that environment's issue that they have created? Could it be a hostile work environment?
I was just about to say
Could
that.
it be racism that they're experiencing in this place? So now, again, like I said, now it's making them feel inferior in a place, but it's the environment that is creating a sense of not being accepting, despite the fact that all the credentials they're probably bringing to the table, all the experience you're bringing to the table.
Right.
So
you can't undercut your experience. And this internalized fear that people have when it comes to the imposter syndrome, like you said, it's that what if? What if I say the wrong thing? Sometimes you may be the only person, you may be the only woman, the youngest person, the only minority in the room. And so you may think, different sometimes about a particular issue and you're afraid to express it. What if I say the wrong thing? What if they think I'm stupid? What if I guarantee you most of the people around that table are thinking the same thing.
And not only that, but you have to keep in mind the education piece too, though. Because if you made it around that table, you got the credentialing.
Absolutely.
And the one thing they can't take from you, and my grandfather always said, one thing they cannot take from you is your education.
Correct.
That's right.
So if you know you made it around the table, you have earned a right around
and you
the
belong.
table.
Absolutely. Think about this. Like you said, you just said it. You got the credentials, you earned it. You're the only person of color or the only female, whatever it is, sitting around that table. But yet you are the one that have to feel as if you don't belong at that table. That is something else at play. That's what institutional racism looks like to me.
Right.
Now let me get it straight. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying the feelings are not right, the self-doubt, the second guessing of themselves, just like you're saying. That's all real. But I think that stems more from a hostile work environment, a non-accepting environment, unconscious biases. Those kinds of things is what's causing that self-doubt, because that's real. A racist environment can cause you to start doubting yourself. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I'm a firm believer that when you are in an environment like that, or you are experiencing fear and anxiety, you need to deal with that and address that as soon as possible, because it will stop you from thriving, because it will consume you.
Absolutely will.
You won't take risk. You won't stand up. You won't apply for greater positions. You won't walk in your purpose because you're so consumed with living in fear and working in fear.
And that's absolutely, you're right. That has to be dealt with, because you just said it. It is basically right back to that fear. And so you're living in that space of what ifs. And in that space of what ifs, we know those are always worse than what it is. But like you said, you're consumed in it, and you're not able to pursue anything else at that point. And you will find yourself more than likely not performing at the level of your capacity or what you're capable of. That kind of reinforces some of those thoughts. So to your point, you're right. You have to address it soon and as quickly as possible.
So let's swing a little bit to another topic, because I'm interested to hear your opinion on this. So what prevents people from starting businesses or living in their purposes? What barriers do you run into when you're trying to get in your lane? So in other words, how many raccoons and possums do you have to run over?
A lot. How many possums? A lot. How many raccoons? A lot. Actually, in my experience, my opinion, and starting my own consulting firm, I can speak from experience, and then I can speak from just conversations. I've had trainings, teachings I've done as well too. I mean, I attended as well too as an entrepreneur. And we've touched on this one so many times, but fear is probably the number one again. And we keep seeing fear resurfacing in every single one of these conversations. So that just goes to show you how important it is to deal with that issue and fear, and how consuming and how powerful fear is. Fear is probably one of the strongest ones out there.
I will also add, a lot of times, just from my experience, I see people don't move because of lack of knowledge.
That was my second.
And
that was it.
Okay. Because, and talk to me a little bit about what the role, importance of having like mentors, or how you gain that knowledge, especially if you can't do it in a formal sense.
Now, that's my favorite topic, mentorship.
Yeah.
I love it.
It's all about mentorship, and not be so along with lack of knowledge and information is also lack of resources. So I think both of those actually go together. And resources we can, define in a lot of different ways as well too. Resources in terms of that information, knowledge that you need in order to know how to create and launch a business, as well as the financial resources that's needed there. So around obtaining information, like, you got to put yourself out there. You've got to do the work. You got to do the research. There's so much out there on the internet. You have to do your research. You have to reach out to people who are already doing the work. What are you interested in, and what is that business you want to go into? Once you've decided that, start talking to people, reaching out, setting up 15-minute calls, and say, I just want a 15-minute call with you. I have these 3 questions, is what I recommend that you do. And you'll be surprised at the number of people that are willing to open up and share information.
I think in this day and age, we are so high touch and high tech. There is no reason that you cannot leverage things like LinkedIn, social media, to reach out to people and say, hey, do you have 5 or 10 minutes? I just like to pick your brain. My name is
absolutely,
such and such.
And people will willingly do it. You're right.
Yep.
And leveraging social media is another one. There are a lot of webinars. There are online classes, there are online seminars, some free, some you may have to pay for. And I also tell people as well, too, you have to be willing to invest in yourself. So if you have to, if it's something you need to know and you don't know it to be successful, invest in yourself and pay for it. Don't be afraid to invest in a coach.
Because your network really does determine your network. And I know that that's kind of cliche. Your network determines your net worth. But the more people you know, the more connections you have, the easier it is for you to share and find information when you
Absolutely. And relationship building.
Gosh, that's the key.
Yes.
Let me tell you, that is the key to success in corporate America.
That is definitely the key. I mean, we all know the old saying, it's not what you know, but who you know.
Correct.
But I think you got to know some stuff, too, to go along with that.
You do.
Absolutely.
You do.
Absolutely.
Because you only get to know who you know by what you know.
Because as you're learning what you know, that's what start expanding your network and opening doors. So that's where all of that plays into each other. So those lack of resources also is another one as well, too, because we got to think about it. Many of us didn't have generations of institutional wealth and large networks. Our parents and grandparents, most of us didn't have that. If you are a first generation college student, or maybe even if you're a second generation college student, that still is not a long line of resources there.
Right.
You know, so we're a lot for most of these students or people who are looking and wanting to feel this urge and I want to be an entrepreneur. There's a fear that I don't have a safety net. Like when you have a safety net, it's easier to jump because you know mom and dad can catch
you. Right. You know, you bring up an interesting point because I'm sure listeners out there are thinking, you know, that all sounds well and good when things are well and good. But given everything that's going on with COVID, social unrest, we have an election on the horizon, jobs insecurity, how are people, you know, one, what have you experienced? Because you took a major leap leaving your workplace and going and starting your own business and jumping out on your own in the middle of what people would consider the worst time in our lifetime. You know, what do you recommend to people who are sitting there saying, that sounds good, but this isn't the time?
You know what? And I've heard that a lot as well, too. But like I said, when you know, you know. When you feel it, because we never feel like things are the right time, because there's always something else you could be doing.
Correct. You know, I got 2 things to say about that. There's number one, there's never a right time. So you're just going to have to do it. And number 2, the bigger the risk, the bigger the reward.
Absolutely.
So you have to take that leap to get to where you want to get, because ain't nobody going to do it for you but you.
That's right. And, you know, there have been a lot of blessings in COVID. And I know it's been a lot of hardship. So I'm not discounting that. But I know people who have said things like they've been able to center themselves, focus on their family, figure out what their purpose is, do a lot of that reflective practice to realize they're in the wrong field. They don't like what it is that they're doing. And, you know,
they develop passions about working in areas of social and political unrest, and they've developed passions about helping other people to thrive. So I do think that just because things are bad, whether it be a pandemic, whether it be crazy stuff happening in society, people being killed, people dying, unemployment, there will always be something. There will always be something, and you cannot allow that to keep you from moving forward.
And I would add to your point is that in those very times, if you're talking about, we're in the middle of COVID, times are tough. We got protests on the streets. The kids are out of school. Schools are, colleges, business. I mean, it's a really turbulent time right now. You know what else I would add? That's a perfect time for change. It is absolutely. That's
true.
Because sometimes the storm comes to clear the way.
Exactly it. And when the midst of the storm is when you find yourself having to reconnect. Just like you said, you heard from people who said, I got centered. You know why? Because that's when you have to go back into yourself. I call it connecting with the ancestors. That's when you have to connect with the ancestors. And you are reminded of where you come from, what we're built of, what we're built on, and then you remind yourself, and for me, this is what I do and what I did that helped me get to this place where I made that move. I reminded myself, you know what, Nicole, do you remember when you were a freshman at that college, you didn't know what you were doing, and you stepped your first foot on that college campus, and you didn't know if you were going to make it, but you made it.
Right.
But you did it.
Correct. Yep. And look at you now.
And so that's what you have to do. So I start having those types of conversations with myself to remind myself of the things that you have overcome, that you have accomplished, and start building on that. And so the other thing, like you said, for people who are saying, yeah, it's good and well, but what do I do? So if you find yourself sitting in the midst of all this turmoil, this is a piece that I leave with them and I'll share on. In the midst of all the turmoil, it's time for change. You know you're feeling something in your belly. I'm not comfortable. I know I need to move. You know what the other thing I tell people? Ask for help. Get a therapist. Get a life coach. Now is the time to start talking, because therapy is good. And we should not run from that either, because in the midst of all of it, it helps clear the way and clears our thoughts, and so that we can get clarity.
Agreed. So I want to thank you, Dr. Nicole, for sharing all of this valuable information with us.
Yes.
I want to say you gave the folks a word to think about today.
I hope so.
Now tell us, can you tell our listeners how they can contact you?
Absolutely. I am Dr. Nicole. I have an educational consulting firm, Dr C Nicole Henderson Consulting, and I empower students and families how to thrive in higher education in developing strategies around a college strategy, not just one piece of it. They can contact me on all social media at Dr C Nicole. That's DRC Nicole. And my website is also drcnicole.com.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Nicole. We appreciate you.
Thank you very much for having me on. I had a ball, but it ended way too quick.
I know. We're going to work on that.
All right, guys. All right. Good night.
All right, Adrian. I think, you know what? I think that we did preach a word to the folks today.
All right.
Good conversation.
Mm-hmm. And we want to hear how you're thriving.
Right.
So let us know. Let us know. What's your definition for success? What does it take for you to thrive? What has been your experience? We want to hear that from you. So share it with us so that we can learn from your experiences, and other people, some of our other listeners and thrivers can learn as well.
Right. And look us up on Instagram, Facebook, and send us emails, because we do want to hear your success stories. And we also want to hear those things that you may be struggling with, because, we may be young, but we've been through a whole lot of trials and tribulations that we can tell you how to overcome some of these humps. I'm just telling you.